Hello everyone, this is Gene from NYC, also known as Gene from New York City, New York. Anyway, I'm back with another video. I just wanted to give a few updates. First of all, I apologize for being away for, almost a week. It wasn't intentional, it's just I've been trying to catch up with a lot of stuff and that left me drained, and so I didn't make any videos. Plus I was kind of like out of ideas for a time. I really didn't know what to cover, but I have a new idea, or rather just something that I want to tackle from a different perspective, so I'll be getting to that in a moment. There's a reason why that I chose the old WWF Attitude game, which is an awesome wrestling game, by the way. It was everything Warzone was and then improved upon it. But anyhow, so there's that. I want to greet the next, I think, 2 or 3 subscribers that have subscribed since I last made a video. My subscriber count is around, I think, 48 or 49. So I'm almost at 50. I mean, I started out with like 15 in December, so to see that, you know, that my subscriber count has multiplied by 3 times is quite, it's quite heartwarming, actually. So thank you all. Thank you all who were subscribed prior and who have subscribed since. I hope to continue to make content that you enjoy. I should hopefully be getting a computer soon so I can actually up my production value and include things such as graphics, maybe a little bit of music, maybe a little bit of video. We'll see what happens. But first I have to get the dang computer in the house. So first things first. But I'm looking at March. Hopefully, well, we're in March, right? Hopefully, in a few weeks, I can spare a little bit of cash to buy a computer, because even a cheap computer is like $200 plus where I am in New York City, and $200 plus is not cheap, right? I have a modest salary, right? Given the work that I do, I'm not rich by any means. I've got, debts to pay. I've got mouths to feed. I feel like I'm about to sing Ain't No Rest for the Wicked. Oh goodness, but that's basically the situation I'm in, right? There is no rest for the wicked, or for me. So sparing $200 plus to buy a computer is, it's a bit of sticker shock, right? It's a bit of price shock. But hopefully within this month I should be able to get a computer. So new video is coming soon. Also, I'm working on a more proper review. Right, all of my documents are at work because that's the only proper computer I have access to. So I'm working on a review of Batgirl 32, I believe it is. I have all the images that I want. I just got to put them in order, put the file together, then print the file. I would have done it today and probably done the video tomorrow, but for those who don't know, New York City is shut down for the day because of snow. We have a snow day. So I can't go to work, which I have to admit, as much as, losing a day of work is not fun, there's always this like eternal 8-year-old inside of me that whenever we get a snow day, it's just like, no school! Or in my case, no work! I can't help it. I enjoy my snow days. Plus, I'll still get paid for it because I have basically saved up break time, and it's paid break time. One of the benefits of working for a university system is that, having saved up break time and you get paid for it. So those 7-8 hours will be used to cover this day. So I lose nothing, and I'm able to make a video bright and early in the morning at nearly 9 o'clock. Of course, by the time this video uploads, it'll be well past 9. But anyhow, I just wanted to update you guys. I'll also be doing a review of the newest Captain Marvel #1 that's out. I actually saw pics of it. It looks awful. It has this very Disney cartoony style that I do not like, that I don't think works for the comic. And I didn't even know that there was a new #1 till I saw Doug Ernst video. because I honestly thought that those images I was seeing were just like preview pics for issue 3. Because I honestly had no plans to do a Captain Marvel review again until issue 4, because that's a request and I will honor it. And plus it's Rogue and Carol, and I'm always interested in seeing how that plays out. But once I saw this number 1 and I just saw how bad it is, I was like, I have to. So once I get Batgirl issue 32 done, then, excuse me, kind of adjusting how I'm sitting here. Once I get Batgirl issue 32 done, then I'll be working on Captain Marvel number 1. So that's 2 comic reviews up in the works. And so let me get to the point of this video, which is attitude, or rather, how attitude, at least in my opinion, how attitude and the desire to be tough and cool actually helped in the 1990s, especially with the depiction of females in media. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there's been a lot of Captain Marvel news, much more than I can recap, and I don't feel like recapping it. But I feel like doing is tackling it from maybe a different perspective. And here's what I mean. I think it's the cover of Entertainment Weekly. It's the one with her in costume, standing in profile and trying to stand heroically. It's not really working, Brie. You just don't have the presence. But anyway, so she's in costume as Captain Marvel, and what's his name? The DH version of Nick Fury is next to her. And one of the, I'm not sure if it's a caption or not, but one of the points, I guess, made on the cover is that the film is going back to the 1990s, and I think they've said that the film is set in 1995, so it's literally set at the midpoint of the decade, that it's going back to the 1990s to fight sexism. Now, this got my attention. I actually spent several days trying to mull it over in my mind, right? Because while I admit I do have a soft spot in my heart for what is effectively my childhood, I've basically been from age 5 to age 14 in that decade. So, I grew up. I've been from a little kid to, a teenager, a young woman, from, kindergarten, first grade to high school. Right, so I did a lot of growing and a lot of changing in that period. And I wanted to make sure that I approached this, and I'll admit, I do probably have rose-colored glasses on. In fact, the glasses, probably the shade of red of this video game. But I also wanted... Sorry about that. As I was saying, while I'm certainly wearing rose-colored glasses, and I admit that, I also wanted to be as fair as I could. So I asked myself the question, and I mulled over it for several days. When it came to youth media, when it came to media that was shown to kids, that was marketed toward kids, whether implicitly or explicitly, when it came to music, movies, TV, video games, right, was pro wrestling, right, was there sexism, right? Were these women portrayed in negative or weak lights? And I would say, for the most part, no. Now, I'm not going to say that there were not backstage issues and internal issues. For example, in pro wrestling, right, the, what's her name? Rena Mero, better known as Sable, she ended up suing Vince McMahon, who owns at the time, the WWF, for millions of dollars for what she said was workplace harassment and whatnot, and Vince trying to force her to do a lesbian angle and things of that nature. Right, so there were certainly some issues in the back. They ended up settling for a few $1 million. I forget what the exact settlement was. But she had alleged that, guys had, done things like, crapped in her bag and punched a hole in the wall. And I do think years later, X-Pac did admit to the whole, taking a dump in her travel bag thing. But from what he says, he did that not because she was a woman, but because she had a big head. many people who work with Sable at that time said that the arrogance, that the character that she played ended up becoming the actual person, and she let the fame get to her head. So even in that, and that's not to excuse what X-Pac did. That was disgusting, right? But it's also part of pro wrestling. There are plenty of other stories about guys doing disgusting things like that in pro wrestling to basically get back at the people that they personally don't like. Pro wrestlers have a very, very, very odd way of handling internal disputes. And if they don't fight it out in the backstage, they pull pranks on each other like that. And again, that is not to excuse what X-Pac did. He shouldn't, nobody should do stuff like that. I'm just saying that it is known to be a part of wrestling culture, at least from what I've heard. It was never about Sable being a woman or Sable being a successful woman. It was about Sable being a bitch. And when you are a bitch, regardless of your gender, the more catty wrestlers like X-Pac will do things like that to your stuff. I think what was it? I think when Randy Orton was young in the business, he ticked somebody off, and it might have been JBL. I don't quite remember the story, but I remember that someone said that they pretty much like poured baby oil all over his ring gear and in his gym bag. So again, pro wrestling is known to handle things in this very immature light. But still, Sable did sue, and there was a settlement. So again, I'm not saying that there were not issues, but the question is, was there sexism? At the very least, was there overt sexism in the youth culture, in what was marketed to kids and the teenagers in the 1990s? And I say no. And I say no because I look back and I tried to be as objective as I could. I looked back at the stuff that I saw, the stuff that was popular at the time, because, I am by no means, in the greater scope of things, I am by no means unique. Nothing that I was into was so specialized or so rare that other people didn't watch it. I knew plenty of people who watched pro wrestling, male and female. I knew plenty of people who played video games and played the video games I did, who watched the TV shows I did, who listened to the music I did, right? R&B, gangster rap was all the rage when I was growing up, so whether or not I wanted to, I heard that music. So nothing that I saw, that I consumed, in entertainment was all that rare or specialized. And when I look back on these things, I actually do think that the 1990s as a whole, even with its issues, was a decade of female empowerment. Let me give some examples, right? And I'm just going to go through quickly because there are so many different things you could look at. But I'm going to start with video games because that's what I'm familiar with, right? As if you've watched my videos, you know that I'm a big Mortal Kombat, big Street Fighter fan, right? And those two games are the reason why you have females in fighting games now. I mean, even Ronda Rousey herself, in an interview for MK11, said that Sonya was an inspiration for her. And I remember, especially playing Street Fighter, I remember that there would always be these, win quotes afterward. And one of Chun-Li's win quotes was, "I'm the strongest woman in the world." That was the first time that I can remember as a little kid seeing a woman like that, seeing this, powerful female who could not only just hang with the guys, but could defeat them in battle, right? That made an impact on me even if I didn't realize it. And here was this woman, challenging other people, challenging men, right? And proclaiming, "I can beat you." Heck, if anything, I think that there was some, how do I put it? I'm not quite sure what the term is, but if you remember the old school Street Fighter games, especially Street Fighter 2, they used to have these portraits, right? The winner's portrait, which was just a standard portrait of the fighter, and then there would be the loser portrait, right, where the fighter's face is just beat to hell, looks like hamburger meat. Their faces are bruised, their mouths are bloody. And guess what? Every character in that game had a loser's portrait that was bruised and bloody and beaten, except for Chun-Li. All Chun-Li had for a loser's portrait, right? Again, this is supposed to be a knockdown, drag-out, brutal street fight that you're playing in every match. And while everyone else, has bruises and they're bloody, and I mean, Vegas is the worst. His like mask is ruined, and his face is just awful, right? And of course, because he's the pretty boy, right? So he's gonna look the worst after a fight. And yet, all Chun-Li has is, as I was saying, everyone else had these, brutal, beat up, terrible looking images. Yet Chun-Li, right, she doesn't look bruised or beat up at all. The most she has is some like very faint scratches like on her temple, and then just as her, angry, frustrated look on her face. So even then, there was a sort of, at least in depicting how she looked when she lost, there was a bit of favoritism, right? She wasn't made to, at least visually, in a sense, suffer the way the guys did, right? They still wanted to keep her looking pretty. And now I suddenly find myself wanting to sing Mississippi Queen. But anyway, moving on. So the reason I bring them up is because those were the first two women that I can recall seeing and playing in video games where, there were these powerful fighters who could be in, a male-dominated tournament, and if you were skilled enough, you could win with them, right? You could basically show, hey, I can take this girl character and kick your butt with her, and kick everybody's butt with her, and win the game with her. And then, of course, later on you had characters like Cammy, but here's the thing, Chun-Li is the reason why you have Cammy. Chun-Li is the reason why you have Rose, and even, moving on to current games like, what's her name? Minot, and you have, Laura, and different female fighters that have been featured in Street Fighter over the years. You have them because of the success and popularity of Chun-Li. Even if you look at the Street Fighter film, right? So many people remember that infamous shower scene. But the most powerful moment, at least in my opinion, that Chun-Li has in that film is the scene right after, right? It's that intense, visceral, brutal fight between her and Vega, right? To me, that's the standout scene of the movie. And that's the fight she wins. This woman fights for her life against an assassin, and she wins. She wins, and it's not just the fact that she wins, but the way she wins. She lightning kicks him through the brick wall, and he falls, presumably to his death. I mean, what other medium were you going to see a woman do that? I can't think of any other medium where you would see a woman do that. And I know that in today's world, the progressive crowd would look at the shower scene, look at the fight scene, and they would go that it's oppressive to women and it's just, making them look like sex objects or objects of torture. I'd be like, okay, if you want to look at it that way, and yes, I do think that the fan service scene was positively useless, because it was fan service. Usually fan service doesn't have much point to it. But here's the thing. It was followed up by a scene where Chun-Li, even though she got injured, she was grievously injured and is out for the rest of the film. She is probably at her strongest in the moment, because think about that scene, right? No one's there to help her. She's being jumped by a vicious assassin who just gets even angrier, especially when she injures his face, right? Guile, what is it? I think the phone falls over at one point, and Guile's trying to call her, and so he's hearing her screams, and he's trying to get to her apartment, but he doesn't get there in time. So here's this woman, against a professional killer, fighting him alone, with no help, and she wins, right? She may again be grievously injured and be unconscious and be out of the film for the rest of it, but she won that fight. I don't know how much more powerful you get. right? So there was video games, right? There was also cartoons, right? X-Men, Batman, and stuff of that sort. And I remember watching those things, and and of course Gargoyles. Oh my god, I love Gargoyles. That is my favorite cartoon of the 1990s. And what I remember watching or realizing, especially as I got older, about those cartoons was the fact that women, what it taught me, especially as a tomboy who was always hanging out with the guys, it taught me that women and men could work together. That everybody had their individual skills, and that you didn't have to necessarily be, the big bad brawler to have value in a group. I mean, one of the things that Elisa had that she kind of is a standout at in Gargoyles is thinking on her feet. There are several scenes, such as when there's a scene where one of the gargoyles turns into stone. The sun rises. They turn to a stone, and one of them's in mid-flight. So he's turning the stone in mid-flight, and he's falling to the ground fast. And of course, if he hits the ground, he gonna die. So what does Elisa do? She shoots down a crate of carpets, and so the gargoyle statue crashes onto the crate. Right, and it busts open the carpets, and he's alive. When the next scene opens, and the gargoyles, it's nighttime, and the gargoyles are awake in their flesh and blood again, and they see that the gargoyle who was falling, who I think was Broadway, is alive. Everybody's like, "Oh my God, he's alive! He's alive!" And there's a moment where Goliath just like openly praises Elisa. I think someone, I forget who it is, but he says something to the effect of like, "It's a miracle, you're alive." And Goliath is like, "Yes, it is a miracle named Elisa." And she just gets like so like aw shucks about it. Hell, I was like aw shucks for her watching that. I was like, girl, take the compliment. But that was what I liked about her. There were other instances like the chase scene, when she and Goliath are kind of trapped in Central Park, and he turns to a stone. That's probably one of the best action sequences I've ever seen in a cartoon. And then there's another one where she fights Demona again when the gargoyles are, it's during the day and they're turned to stone. So that show really made a point to show that Elisa, was on par with the gargoyles. Maybe she couldn't fly. Maybe she couldn't necessarily, fight the way that they did, because she didn't have their raw physical strength. But she could outthink people. She could think fast on her feet, and that was and of course, being things like a woman of her time, right? So she was able to get them things like computers, and is able to sort of bring them up to speed as much as you can about New York City and the greater world in the mid-1990s. So she really did have a major role to play. And there were other women in that show too. There was Fox, there was her mother, Titania, there was Demona, there was Angela. There were so many, whether they were the good guy or the bad guy or somewhere in between. There were so many strong women in that show who were strong in different ways. Like, one of the most empowering parts of Fox is the fact that she's a mother. She's actually able to tap into her latent magic abilities because she wants to defend her child, when basically her mother and then her mother's husband, right? Not her father. Her father is a human being, but her mother's husband is basically like the king of the elves. I think it's Avalon, and basically they both come to claim her son because the son has latent magical abilities. And Fox, just out of panic and fear, just like shoots a bolt of like magic energy at them. Why? To protect her child, right? To protect this life that she made with Xanatos. So it's like, where in the world do you get this impression that there was sexism in the 1990s? And there are other things you can look at. You could look at music, right? There were so many female artists who who came to prominence in the 1990s in the music scene. You had Whitney Houston, you had Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, you had Mariah Carey. In the R&B scene, you had Toni Braxton, you had Erykah Badu, TLC, Mary J. Blige. If you look at rock and roll, you had groups like Garbage, who was fronted by a woman, Shirley Manson. You had groups like Hole, fronted by a woman, Courtney Love. You had in the pop scene, you had a group Ace of Base, fronted by a woman. Madonna reinvented herself a good 2 or 3 times at least during that decade. And then you had, what is it? Even in the rap scene, right? Rap is very hard and macho and all that, but you had women like Da Brat, Foxy Brown, Little Kim, Missy Elliott, right? You had back going to R&B, you had Aaliyah coming out toward the end of the decade. So it's like, where was this sexism? Where were women being oppressed? Women were, to me, in my experience and what I saw, the 1990s may have been the best decade, at least that I have lived through, when it came to female empowerment and showing and true female empowerment, showing that women were powerful. I mean, you had cartoons like Carmen Sandiego, right? Female-led cartoon. Everybody wants to, talk about the first female-led movie, first female superhero movie. It's like, did y'all not see Carmen back in the day? Carmen Sandiego? Or what was it like? What was it? Magic School Bus. You had shows like Lamb Chop, right? Sherry Lewis. Hell, even shows like Pepper Ann. Silly cartoons like that. You had stuff like that, and then of course in TV you had Xena and you had Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But even if you look at shows that were not action oriented, like say Dawson's Creek, right? Who was the biggest star out of Dawson's Creek? Who was the big name? Katie Holmes, and her character was not shown to be a wimp in any way, and this was basically a teen drama. And there was just so much. I could go on forever if I had the time, just pointing out how there was actual female empowering media on TV. Even shows that, what was it, Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, Touched by an Angel. What is it like 2 of the 3 main characters of Touched by an Angel are 2 women. The Irish lady who plays Monica and Della Reese. It's like, where are you getting this idea that there was sexism? You look at the movies, even, what was it, Tomorrow Never Dies. That's probably my favorite Bond film. Who was the standout of that, aside from Pierce Brosnan? Michelle Yeoh, playing the good Bond girl, right, who can't keep up with him, and lives and gets the guy at the end. So again, I asked you, it's like, where in the world was this rampant sexism that was trying to hold women down? From what I'm seeing, and I'm covering different modes of entertainment, it was the exact opposite. I would say it was the age of the female. It's when female empowerment really seemed to come into its own. I think it started in the 70s, and then it seemed to really hit its peak in the 1990s. Even in pro wrestling. I mean, again, I talked earlier about the issue Sable had, but for every person who was eye candy like Sunny or Sable or Marlena, which, as much as I was not a big fan of those people because they were, again, the eye candy, the fact of the matter is that they did help the company get noticed on the mainstream, and they did contribute in that sense. You really wouldn't have the women's evolution and the women's division you have now without them. But still, if you look at that time period, right, while you had Vince's preference of buxom blondes like Sable and Sunny and Marlena, you also had the women who were not that, right? You had, of course, one of the biggest stars was China, And China was never that, blonde bombshell. And keep in mind, she was in Playboy too. Blonde buxom Sable was in Playboy, so was China. After a certain point. And even when you think about how China got noticed in the business, it wasn't for her sex appeal at first, right? At first, she came in as this very, large, stoic bodyguard character who hardly spoke, right? She sort of gained a character and a personality later on as she became a more prominent member of DX, and she started getting over with the fans. But the whole sex appeal, that's not what China was about at the height of her fame. She got all that later in the 2000s, but in the beginning, she just wore all black leather. She stood there with her hand, crossed over her chest, right? She was noticed, and she got noticed because she was physically imposing. She was scary. She was intimidating, and that's what people liked about her. And then, of course, you had that she was one of the first females to seriously work, prominent females, I should say, to seriously work matches against men, against Jeff Jarrett, against Jericho. And yes, I know there were some backstage shenanigans to make that happen, but still, it did happen. Right? The reason why you have, for example, intergender or mixed gender matches now is because China was the one who made it cool back then. She was in the Royal Rumble. Remember Nia Jax in the Rumble, right? In the men's Rumble. You know why that's possible? Because China did it first. So, show respect. And then, of course, even prior to China, you had women like Alundra Blaze, and you had Bull Nakano. There was actually a time where Vince did have a small collection of Japanese female talent in the company. And then there was women like Sherry Martel in the early 90s. So even in pro wrestling, while there was always had its issues, there were prominent women who were there for their talent and not just their sex appeal. You even look like, say, Lita, right? How did Lita stand out? She was a punk just like the Hardy Boys. She was a wrestler just like the Hardy Boys. Lita did not become eye candy until much later in her career. But what got her noticed, was actually, I think first she was allied with Essa Rios. But anyhow, I have rambled on way too long. So to make a long story short, based on the stuff that I observed in the 1990s, there was not any sexism, or at least not any rampant sexism. I'm not going to say that there weren't issues, but I'm still trying to see where in the world women were being held down. To me, it was truly the age of female empowerment. Have a good night.